Hi. What I want to look at in this one is a very quick and dirty video on the remediable pension savings statements, because it came out today, or it's been starting to become out to a number of teachers today, and there's a lot of panic in the teachers world about what it means. There's some very large numbers and some people are very worried that they're being asked to pay hundreds of thousands of pounds. Generally speaking, that's not the case. It shouldn't be that much. It should be anywhere near that much. And I just want to go through the consequences of what this means. Because of the change to the pension scheme, the rollback due to the McLeod issues and everything being put back into the final salary scheme, the value of the pensions have changed. Now, for most people, this should actually mean a drop in how much has been used of the personal allowance, of the annual allowance. Every year, you are allowed to add so much to a pension scheme and get tax relief. If you go over those limits, then the government say, well, we'd like the tax back that we gave you the relief on. But there's a problem with the schemes like the pension scheme, like the teacher's pension scheme. It's not just about the amount of money you paid in. It's all to do with how much the pension increased in value. And this can be quite significant if you get a big pay rise. Or, as happened in 2022-23, we had a very high inflation rate of 10%. The way in which the valuation works is that the pension value is multiplied by 16 and then the lump sum added on. With an increase of 10%, a pension could easily go from 20,000 to 22,000, an increase of £2,000. Multiply that by 16 and you're getting up to 32,000. Add on the lump sum, you're getting up to 35, 36,000. And when the allowance is only 40,000, you can see it doesn't take very much for the pension to be tipped over the annual allowance. Now, they do allow for this kind of thing by allowing you to use 3 years of unused allowances. But to check on that, you've got to have all the figures from the last or the 3 years prior to when you went over the limit. So that's what these letters are coming out on. They're coming out because of the change in the pension values retrospectively because of this rollback situation. And the letters come out, they will show you, they will start at the one that you went over the limit or the scheme thinks you went over the limit. So not everybody's got one of these. And they'll use the 3 years prior to that. So you may not have a full list as I'm going to show you. You may only have some of these years. And so we get a table like this appearing, and it's got the total pension by a tax year with this very strange bit around 2015, 2016 where the limits were introduced or changed, and there's a bit of messing around. So we've got 2 rows in there, which I've just shaded in a slightly darker color here to indicate that there's something strange going on there. It's very important when we're looking back at the previous 3 years that we know that we actually got to go down an extra line for this point in time. So if all we've got to do to start off is put the numbers into the spreadsheet. Now be careful, you may not have a line for 2024 because you probably haven't gone over the limit in 2024. In 2023, inflation went up by 10%, and therefore the pension increase value was quite significant. So my 53,830, that's actually from the 2022-23 tax year. So I'm going to put that into that one. And you can see straight away that's nearly £14,000 over the allowance. The allowance for 23 was 40,000. We are way over that allowance. But we are going to be allowed to use unused allowances from the previous 3 years. So if I put in the next figure for ending April 22, £41,901.68. Well, that's already also over the limit. So we're not going to be able to do much with that. And we carry on putting down all of the others until we've got the whole list in. And once we've got the whole list in, like this, we can start to see where we might be able to use some unused allowance. And the red ones are the one I've got where I've gone over the limit. So we're going to look back to those. Now, I'm not going to start at the top because if I've used unused allowances lower down, I can't then use them again higher up. So we've got to start at the bottom, and my bottom figure here is 2016, this figure where we were nearly 12,000 over the allowance. You'll notice that the allowance in this year was naught, but in the bit before it was 80,000, and that's because that's this unusual year where things were changed and introduced. So it's very much that introduced, and they gave us an 80,000 allowance for the first part of the year and then nothing for the second part. But because we're allowed to roll this forward, we're allowed to use these unused amounts, that's not a problem. We can use that anyway. Now this 12,000, I don't go straight to the next line. So I'm going to use some of this 75,000 that's unused. We start by going back 3 years. Now remember that I said that we've got this point here where these two rows are the same year. So going back 3 years is 1, 2, 3. The 40,000 from March 2013. So I can use up, well, I've got 40,000 that I didn't use. Therefore, with the 11,900, I can take all of that and I'll still have plenty left over. So I'm going to use all of that up. And my last column here is just a little reminder of what year I took that from. So that's 2012 to 2013. That really only becomes important if I've only used part of it and I want to use some of it the next time around. Now for the next one, we're also over. So again, I can go back 3 years. Now going back 3 years this time, goes back only as far as 2014, because this was 2017, going back 3 years, 2014. So I can only go back to the row here, but that's got an unused allowance of 33,000, more than enough to cope with using up the whole of the £751 that it looks like I was owing. But that's from 2013/14. We then come to those 3,000. Have we got unused allowance? Well, it'll go back 3 years. 1, those 2, 3. We're back to this year. Well, there's 12,500. So yes, there's plenty of room for me to use all of that from 2014 to 2015. And you may be wondering about this line. I'll explain about that at the end. So now we go on. We had 19,000 of unused, 6,500, 3,500 of unused. We come to 2022, nearly 2,000 over. And can I use that from 3 years before? I go 1, 2, 3. Yes, there's £19,000 of unused allowance from 3 years ago. So I can use all of that. I can get rid of all of that excess in one go. That is all from 2018 to 19. And then I come to the big one, the 13,800. Now, this is the one that's going to cause us a problem. And it causes a problem because we're allowed to use 3 years. But one of those years was over this. So there was no unused allowance for us to use in that year. 2, 3. So that's only these two. I can't go back and use any of that 19,000. I've already used 2,000, but I can't use the other 17,000 anymore because it's now 4 years ago. So I can only go back 3 years. So I can use both of these figures. So it's equals, and because I'm going to mathematically, I'm going to take away those because they're negatives and say I can use up all of that unused allowance. The total of those two there is £10,280, which leaves me a tax charge of £3,529. So that comes from the 2019-2020 and the 2020-21 years, but no more. I've got no more I can use. So I've got a tax charge there in 2023 of £3,500. But I don't owe them £3,500. What I owe them depends on what income tax I was paying. Now, if I was paying 40% income tax, they want 40% back because they gave us the tax relief on that. And they're saying we shouldn't have had it because we were over the annual allowance. We were paying too much into the pension scheme. It doesn't matter. We weren't actually paying this in. It's to do with the increase in value of the pension. If you're paying only 20% income tax, then of course you're half the bill and the bill will be £705. Now for some people these bills could be quite big. I mean, I've seen one £16,000, £20,000, and there's no way the teacher says they're going to be able to afford to reach into that back pocket and pull out a check and say, here you go, have your 20,000 and I'll keep that. There is an alternative. You can ask the teacher's pension scheme to pay it on your behalf. This is not a freebie. It's not a get out of jail free card. They will pay it, but then you owe them it. So if I ask the scheme to pay this, and it's called Scheme Pays, if I ask the scheme to pay this, they will pay the taxman the money we owe, and then we owe them that amount of money. They will claim it back when the pension starts getting paid. If you die before then, it's wiped out, forgotten about. If you take the pension at normal age, then they will start to deduct it bit by bit. And they don't take it all in one go. They don't take it out of your lump sum. They will take it gradually over probably 20 years. The aim is to pay it back over a normal average lifespan. So that's how the sheet works. The only really tricky part of this, which I've not yet managed to automate, is understanding how you can put in figures in column E that come from unused amounts from the previous 3 years. But the link to the spreadsheet will be underneath the video. Please do use it, and if you get stuck, give me a shout, or one of the experts in the Facebook group a shout, and we'll do our best to give you a hand in working out what this might be. Remember, this is no substitute for following the instructions in the letter that you're sent, so you should be going on to the HMRC website, plugging these figures in, and it is a real pain. I've been on there and tried to do it. They ask you loads of questions that you are going to need your tax returns for all of these years in order to be able to put in the figures you need. So good luck. Sorry I can't be of any more help on that. But I forgot. I forgot to tell you about the black line that's just above or under the 2020 financial year. From reading what it says on the HMRC website, if there is a bill to pay on the amounts below that line, they're going to be ignored. So if there is an amount under that line, we will ignore that, and they won't ask you to pay the 20 or 40% tax rate. It's only going to be for the parts above the line. It actually works the other way around as well. The scheme can owe you money. If you had a tax charge in these years, if you had this and you asked the scheme to pay that amount, then that will be cancelled. Or if you actually paid it yourself, if you paid it directly to HMRC, then you should be getting a refund from HMRC for the money you paid if the amount you are charged is less than it was at the time. So you're good. If it's you owe them, then they're going to ignore it up until 2019. If they owe you, then they're going to pay you it. Sounds good. Good luck.